September 3rd, 2019 was a remarkable day. Like many of you, I was going through Facebook and I saw a post. Now, a lot of other people laughed when they saw this picture. Now, when I saw this picture, because of my unique experiences in the world, I had a very different response than even most of you and the followers on Facebook. But I want to just start off by saying that this is actually a parody of this image. Now, for those of you who don't know who this is Nicki Minaj and her husband, Kevin Petty. And Nicki is the reigning queen of rap music and also the queen of the culture, which right now is something we talk about when we refer to hip-hop culture and its emergence in pop culture and mainstream culture in America. So, you heard a little bit about my bio, but I want to just make it more concise for you on why I had a very different reaction to this image. I grew up down the street from here in Rochester in the 14621 area code on streets like Conkey, Avenue D, and First Street, some of the poorest communities in our city. And then, through my service to our country, the deployments, the GI Bill, allowing me to go off to Yale University, meeting mentors like Bob Duffy, our former police chief and mayor and lieutenant governor, and being the first African-American executive at the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce at the age of 27, this image says something very different to me. Somebody who has to balance between the block where much of my family still lives, and if you don't know what the block is, it's shorthand for just the neighborhoods where predominantly a lot of minorities live, and typically they also are low income. And the boardroom of the Chamber of Commerce. As you heard in my bio, I oversee our portfolios for workforce development, talent strategies, and education initiatives. So when I saw this image, it showed me that those two worlds, where you have the queen of rap music and her husband, right, in one silhouette, but the faces of the First Lady and the President of the United States in the image as well. And so feeling all invigorated and excited, I made this post. I don't care how successful you become. If you lose yourself in the process, you've effectively accomplished nothing. But to my dismay, many of my friends on Facebook didn't see this image the way I did, and even this room did. When I looked at the reactions, I saw that the laughing reaction was the most commonly used. So at that moment, I was out at Olive Garden picking up my lunch, and I saw an older African-American woman and a younger African-American girl sitting at the bar. So I walked over to them, and I said, "Excuse me, can you tell me what you see when you look at this image?" I was disappointed to hear terms like, "It looks a little ratchet," which if you don't know what ratchet means, ghetto, which followed the ratchet word, or uncouth, unprofessional. It looks like a parody. And this is when my antenna went up. It looks disrespectful to the President and First Lady. My jaw hit the ground. I said, "Wow, that's really what you saw when you looked at this?" They said, "Yeah, what did you see?" I saw that any young woman who expresses herself in accordance with the contemporary culture has a First Lady or a president in them. Any young man that expresses himself in that way has a first gentleman or a president in him. And they looked at me and their eyeballs got so big. They said, "Wow, I could see that. I could see how you saw that." The next question that followed was, if you don't even see these images as respectful with the face of the President and First Lady on them, what do you think about the young men and women who conduct themselves or carry themselves or express themselves in that manner? This is the heart of my talk today. My reaction to this was complete disappointment not just in the broader community, but even in my own community. That the stereotypes and bias that we have about people and their potential. Now, as a critical thinker, I went as far as to think to myself, do President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama have value to most people simply for who they are? Or did the office of the presidency and the office of the First Lady provide value to these black individuals? That's a question that America has to ask itself. Our society has to ask itself. The big revelation for me is that we have to advance our understanding of what it means to be an American. For quite some time now, we've always thought of ourselves as the great melting pot, right? But now when I hear melting pot, what I'm really hearing is there is this implicit and innate expectation that we should all conform and assimilate to customs and norms that we all didn't have a hand in making. I'm here to posit before you all today that when we advance that understanding of what our society should be, that beyond the melting pot is the salad bowl, where each element of the dish adds to the flavor and the taste of what it is. I mean, as you all can tell, I work out. But even I wouldn't want to eat a salad with only lettuce, right? The tomatoes, the onions, the carrots, the blue cheese if you like it, the bacon bits if you like it, the cheese if you like it. All add something unique to the overall salad. If we can't find it in ourselves to allow each and every expression of the American identity to be as it is, mind you, as I'm giving this talk, there is a young kid in high school down in Texas who can't even attend his graduation because he has dreadlocks. Think about the message that sends to young youth of color in particular. It's not only in their expressions that we problematize them, but also in their biological makeup. Dreadlocks is a very natural hairstyle, especially when it's this texture. And to have that be ostracized and to be marginalized behind it, what do you think that message is sending to that young man? Or the countless of other minority youth across this country who already feel that they're being failed day by day by the interconnected, interdependent systems, whether it's their family system, the work system, which I see every day, education system, the criminal justice and youth justice system. And yes, there are costs associated with that. Let me try you on one for this. In our community, the highest tuition cost of any K-12 student is in the Rochester City School District, which is a majority minority district, 80% between Latinos and African Americans. Annually, it costs between $24,000 and $27,000 to educate that child. From kindergarten to 12th grade, we're talking in the ballpark of $300,000, folks. Now, when we assess life outcomes such as employment, standard of living, quality of life, we know, statistically speaking, if you're born in this identity, in this community, Adrian Hale's story is an anomaly. And for most of my peers, they have a small handful of fates that we can predict. One, they will be failed by the workforce system, meaning that they graduate with degrees that aren't even worth the paper they're written on. I call it the bigotry of inability, being disqualified by default. So you jump around from entry-level job to entry-level job, only to finally get frustrated and then find a much more lucrative opportunity in the shadow economy. That's the second outcome, the life of crime. Or maybe you don't want to do that. We graduate you on to further dependency, where you take in, whether it's court costs, law enforcement costs, SNAP costs, which is also known as food stamps, HEAP, which is an energy subsidy that folks use, or the countless others in the cornucopia of social programs that we provide to our citizens. And the worst of all is death. Now, there's one other alternative. Some of those students graduate and they leave our region. But here's the catch. Most of them run off to the Sun Belt. Cities like Nashville, Charlotte, Atlanta, Raleigh, you name it. There's a number of cities right now on the rise, rapidly growing, who all spend a significantly smaller amount on public education. So in effect, we are subsidizing the education costs for other cities who are growing at a much more rapid rate. If you remember nothing, there is a cost to inequality. So we really need to assess why we are where we are. And what is the implicit message when some Americans are precluded from the American experience? Not just from the economy, but also society. This is what we're all being faced with today. And I want to leave you with this message. If you wondered, what would you be doing when Susan B. Anthony cast her illegal ballot 200-some years ago? Or when Frederick Douglass stood up not far from here and asked the question, what does the 4th of July mean to the Negro? A question we can still ask, a question that is implicitly being asked in the subtext of this talk. Where you would be when Dr. King locked arms and marched for civil rights and freedom. Where you would be when Emma Lazarus wrote the new Colossus that graces the Statue of Liberty. What are you doing now? That's a great predictor of what you would have been doing. There are so many challenges confronting America, and we can focus on just one person. But our society produced this. And I'll be the first to say that this is not the best moment, but it doesn't have to be the beginning of something much worse. We make that decision. We have to decide, who do we want to be remembered as? Would you have been standing on the sidelines and all the aforementioned examples? Or would you have been in the fight to allow the spirit of this country to continue to overwhelm the flawed lettering from the Constitution to the various laws and policies that shape our society today? I love that we're in a school because there's a 17-year-old girl named Greta Thunberg who became super, super big in her global pursuit to bring awareness to climate change. So all the young people in the audiences, you're never too young to say that poverty also is a man-made problem. Racism and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia and anti-Semitism and the countless other forms of hate that plague us all, that plague our civilization, and in many ways have come to define it. You're never too young to take on equity as the challenge. Because as simple as those two chains around his neck could draw comparisons about him, what happens when anatomies change? When self-expressions change and experiences change? When someone says that they were incarcerated, didn't they pay their debt to society? And how does society reintegrate that individual to be successful and a contributing member? It's never too early to find your cause. And I promise you, in finding your cause, you'll also find your voice. That's what happened to me. So please suspend your judgment. Go forward interested in learning, listening. In that act, you'll discover what it means to be an American. And the world is dependent on it. Thank you.